Hello, welcome to On Wildlife. I'm your host, Alex Ray. On this podcast, we bring the wild to you. We take you on a journey into the life of a different animal every month, and I guarantee you're going to come out of here knowing more about your favorite animal than you did before. This month's animal is known for being extremely colorful and a little talkative too. And we have a special guest, Marco Wendt, who's a spokesperson for the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance and has plenty of experience working closely with these awesome avians. So get ready to hear a lot of chatting as we fly into the world of parrots. There are about 400 parrot species worldwide, and you can find them on almost every continent except Europe and Antarctica. They prefer to live in tropical environments. You can find the most parrot diversity in South America and Australia. Most parrot species eat a variety of fruits, seeds, and other plant parts. They've also been known to eat insects and small animals. Now, our guest, Marco Wendt, has been working with parrots and other birds for a long time. He's got a lot of cool information to share about parrots that I can't wait to get into. So let's hear about how he got his start.
Hi, Marco. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, friend. Like I was saying earlier, it's always a great day here at the safari park, so happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in working with birds.
Yeah, of course. Well, my name is Marco Wendt. My official title is Wildlife Ambassador for San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. And I have over 28 years experience working in the zoology world. But, it all started actually when my parents got me some baby chicks, my friend. Being very, very young, got these, I think it was 6 total, loved them, got the habitat all set up for them in my backyard. And I remember being a little kid looking out my window, admiring my little baby chickies. And then all of a sudden, this big giant hawk came out of nowhere and started chasing my chicks. And I remember for like the first couple seconds, I was very distraught, obviously, for my little babies. But very quickly, my brain went to, what is that bird? What kind of a bird is that? And from there, honestly, my love of birds just took off into a soar, I guess you could say.
That's great. And you kind of got to see the circle of life there.
100%. Until this day, honestly, as dramatic and intense as it can be, for me, the predator-prey dynamic is one of my favorite things to see because it's like you're putting all of this evolutionary traits of 2 species, together to see this dynamic situation happen, So yeah, I definitely appreciate that nuance.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were saying before, you're an ambassador and spokesperson for the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. So what's the mission of this organization and what do you do there?
Yeah, so as you said, we're San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. We're an international nonprofit conservation organization. We have our 2 conservation parks, which in case your listeners are not familiar with, here in the city of San Diego in California in the United States. We have the San Diego Zoo in the heart of San Diego, about a little over 100 years now of conservation successes. And where I grew up is where I'm at today, at the safari park, which is in the town of Escondido. So it's about maybe 30 minutes north. I call it like the backcountry of San Diego, which is, I'm a San Diego native. So this is where I grew up, the East County, the North County of San Diego. It's not just beaches, right? San Diego is remarkable because we have valleys, forests, deserts, and of course the coastal areas as well. But it's a super dynamic place to work. And our mission, it's really combining our world-class expert wildlife care with our conservation science. And with all of these attributes to our successes, it's really about the people. We need to inspire the communities of the world about the work that we're doing. And because as you and I both know, you inspire someone, hopefully they become an advocate for conservation practices in the future. So that's really our core, I think, fundamental.
Absolutely. And I'm 100% behind the idea that if you can get people interested in animals and caring about even one specific animal early on, then they'll become an advocate for them later on in their life.
Yes, 100%, right? And with all the projects that we do, I always say, conservation always begins with human beings. And a lot of people who want to get into the zoological world, I make fun of some of my coworkers who, they say, like, I love animals, but I hate people. But to be honest, we all know, and it's something that I think all people really should know, that really all this work begins with human beings. We can't disassociate ourselves from the work that needs to get done. So it always begins with human beings.
Absolutely. And let's just start talking about parrots. So they're known for their ability to make a variety of different noises, including even mimicking human words. So how are they able to do this? And does this give them any advantages in the wild?
Yeah, that's a really awesome question, and we get asked that all the time, especially with our parrot ambassadors in the past. I've worked in bird shows. That's my a good portion of my time here at the safari park. My background is more focused on animal training, husbandry behaviors, free flight behaviors I have a lot of experience with. So with parrots, they're such a unique animal, for one. I often tell people they're one of the most intelligent animals on the planet. Now, you can quantify intelligence in many different ways. And by that I mean, like, for instance, a pigeon can see over 300 different types of green, because they're adapted to their environment and migrating different spaces, versus maybe a magpie from North America can recall over like 300 different spots that they have stashed their acorns, as an example. So really, animals are intelligent, I think, for their environments and the ecosystems they live in. But with that being said, parrots, so intelligent. So I throw them up there with animals like the elephant, the dolphin, the dog, and the ape. Some people, and you're going to love this, but this is what a lot of my colleagues and I have used in the past to describe a parrot. Having a parrot in your home, as an example, it's like having a 2-year-old with a pair of scissors in one hand and a blowhorn in the other. Now, the 2-year-old is a reference to their intelligence. They are so smart. And some people like to compare that to that of a toddler intelligence, to give you an idea of that. The blowhorn and the scissors is kind of a comical way to explain to people why, and we can get into a little later, why they don't make necessarily the best pet, right, for many people. The blowhorn is in reference to their vocal cords, how some of these animals have to make a call, whether it be territory or trying to attract a mate, and some of these calls have to traverse thick rainforests or large expanses. So imagine having maybe a hyacinth macaw, one of the largest parrots, or the largest parrot in the world, making a squawking call at 4 o'clock in the morning. May not be your favorite thing. The scissors, on the other hand, that's a reference to their beak. As you and I both know, that beak is constantly growing. Many of them nest in cavities of trees, so they need to gnaw on things, basically, in the wild to keep that beak down. I've heard stories of people with parrots in homes who maybe didn't offer let's use the word appropriate sort of environment for their parrots, especially during breeding season, and regrettably had their parrot chew through their wall. So I know I'm getting sidetracked, but you were talking about mimicking, and with their intelligence, they are a very intelligent animal. Now, there isn't too many examples of parrots mimicking random sounds to attract a mate, like maybe other species may do, like a bowerbird as an example. But we do know this, that parrots, like many other species, we have the larynx, in the throat area. The syrinx is the part of their vocal cords that they're actually using more to make those kind of vocal sounds. And those sounds can be extremely varied. It could be a very unique call to warn the flock or its mate of a potential predator. Maybe you're a parrot in the Amazon and possibly a collared falcon or a harpy eagle comes by, or a jaguar. So they do maybe a warning squawk to alert its mate or its youngsters or its flock. There's other situations of not only using vocal cords, but their body language and foreign objects to attract the mate also. And I know I'm getting sidetracked from the mimicking ability, but I want to remind people and your listeners, it's not just being vocal to attract the mate. The palm nut cockatoo, as an example, the male, will not only do a booming sound, but he'll also grab a stick and pound it like a drum on certain objects, just to give you the diversity of what vocals and auditory stimuli can be for a parrot. But I know I'm getting sidetracked. But yes, parrots are really good at mimicking. Their vocal ranges vary, again, from different ecosystems I told you. It could be a parrot in North America or a parrot in Australia versus Africa or Australia. The calls can be different. The mimicking capabilities, to me, it speaks more of their intelligence level. Why parrots mimic more often than not for us, I think it's because they're so intelligent that they want to actually either get something from the human being or get their attention, and that's where I see a lot of the mimicking of different sounds. And I know you and I are saying mimicking. Some people tend to say parrots are speaking, and you and I both know they're not really speaking like we are right now, engaged in a conversation. Granted, they do communicate, but not into this way. So when a parrot is mimicking a human sound, there's a reason for it. They're associating it with something. For instance, I actually have 2 parrots in my home, not because I wanted them, but because of what I do for a living, and not to talk ill of parrots, just because I know what it's like to have a parrot in your home. It's a long commitment. Some of these birds are going to live 50, 60. I knew a parrot cockatoo that was 80 years old. So think about that commitment level, right? So I bring this up because I have very vocal parrots. I have an African gray who will say good morning to me in the morning. It's not because he knows it's morning. It's because I have associated the words good and morning to this particular time of day. So that's generally when he's saying that. But they're so intelligent. I'm going to use my African gray as an example. So he will do a wolf call, when he sees a human, walk by. Because he knows if he makes that call, he'll get a reaction from that human being. He will change his vocal to a child laughing and physically dancing when he sees a human child come by. So I see him change his vocals depending on the scenario around him. I've even seen him mimic the sounds of the crows in the area, and I've seen them actually calling back to each other. Now, I know I mentioned that in the wild, there's not too many examples of that. But again, we're talking about a parrot in a domesticated setting. But there's so many different parrots around the world that can do this ability. But to the extent of mimicking, say, a human word, we don't see too many of that example out in the wild.
That's so interesting. And you can tell just by the sounds that they make and what they expect out of that, how intelligent they are. That's so cool that they're able to do that.
Yeah, 100%.
It's so cool to hear about how parrots can use mimicking to get reactions out of people. We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll hear about some more adaptations that parrots have. Time for today's trivia question. What do you call a person who studies fish? The answer is an ichthyologist. Now let's get back to the episode.
What are some other adaptations that they might have that help them survive in the wild?
You know, I was thinking about this question, and to me, it's 2 things that come to mind. One is back to that intelligence level. I mean, some of these animals, they're interacting with a variety of different other species. So think about what a parrot maybe in the Amazon will have to do to survive. An example could be some of the fruit. For instance, we've seen studies of some of the fruit or seeds that they're consuming has a level of toxicity in them, just naturally into that food item. And in the past, people have wondered, why don't these parrots in the Amazon get sick from these particular items? And a little more further study and investigation had found a certain group of, I think it was green wings and scarlet macaws. They're flying into an embankment by a river. And these biologists were noting that they were eating a particular kind of clay. And they found out, why are they eating this clay? And the deduction was the clay in their system was helping to absorb the toxins from the food that they were eating in that area. Now think about that intelligence level and how adaptive they were for that environment versus maybe a parrot from, say, New Zealand, a Kia, one of my personal favorites. They're not the most colorful parrot in the world, but they're one of the few parrots that actually live in more of an alpine, snowy environment. And that's something people tend to forget. You think of a parrot, you instantly think of a jungle. That's not the case. We have parrots in cold, mountainous weather, like the thick-billed parrot or the Kia, that naturally live in these colder environments. There's also evidence of non-native parrots living now in cities like Los Angeles or here in San Diego and thriving. And these are parrots that originally came from the tropics, and they found themselves in these cities in North America in these colder environments, and they're doing great because of that intelligence level. So my number 1 for parrots for survivability and adaptability is their intelligence level. The other one I wanted to point out, it's a behavioral thing. It's how social they are. Now, many other animals are not as social. Some are more solitary, some even more social depending on the species. But overall, when I think about parrots in any corner of the planet, There's always this aspect of a flock dynamic and also of a mate. Most parrots, if I'm not mistaken, are primarily monogamous. I say primarily because nothing really is black and white in nature. But by that I mean, they will stick with their mate for the rest of their life. But there's also this communal aspect which really helps for survivability too, for maybe spotting that predator coming in, or for possibly for procuring resources as well. So those are my top two, I think, that for me really sets parrot apart: the social aspect and just their overall intelligence level.
That's really interesting. And I've seen with, doing so many of these episodes that a lot of the more intelligent animals, or the animals that we regard as intelligent, are social animals. And it's because they know how to communicate. They're really good at problem solving with other individuals. So it's just something interesting that I've seen as a pattern.
Oh, 100%. I think I put it as more like reading behavior. Like they're intuitive in that regard, that they're perceiving certain aspects of that social dynamic, so they're really awesome that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked a little bit about the social aspect of their lives. And you did mention some of the mating rituals. Can you talk a little bit more about how other species attract mates?
Yeah, for me, the palm-nut cockatoo is probably one of the more unique ones. We know that parrots and other species have used tools like chimpanzee, evidence of crows, other animals utilizing tools. But the fact that this one species of cockatoo in Australia grabs a physical object, a stick, to drum it with their foot, I think that's crazy, right? Such an expressive way to capture, to attract a mate. But, overall, there's other aspects. Depending on the species, it can vary from a hyacinth to a thick-billed. But overall, some of the attributes, I would say, in general, let's do a broad stroke of parrots out and around the planet. The color, right? People think of parrots and their colorful nature, and the pigmentation serves a lot of purposes for parrots. People would be surprised to hear that, like a scarlet macaw, as an example, or a green wing, will blend in very well to the tropical environment. Granted, you and I as a human being, we see this really small, I would say pretty sad little spectrum of color, because other animals can see so much. So we see something that maybe a jaguar wouldn't see, or a harpy eagle. So some of the same colors wouldn't be received to us like they would to another predator or to another parrot. The other example I would give you are a hummingbird. So think about a hummingbird in your backyard, and you see green, you see a flower popping up here and there, but they see in a variety of if you ever heard of black light before, or ultraviolet light. So for them, the world is a kaleidoscope of color that we do not see, but they experience it because they need to see that receptive flower off in the distance. So parrots, in my opinion, color is a big aspect depending on what species we're talking about. Even if it's an African gray, more gray color with a really bright red tail, or the scarlet macaw with that vibrant rainbow color, or even the kea, which if you look at a kea without the wings open, you'd think a drab green bird. But again, there's more aspects to that color that we're not picking up with our human eye, and they have gorgeous colors on their primary feathers as well. So I think in general, again, color to show health, vitality, that you're an adult, you do really good, you can eat, you're thriving, your colors are great. Sometimes it's even, for a lot of parrots, offering food, Maybe if you go on a date to a movie, possibly, you wouldn't necessarily would be regurgitating your popcorn to your mate to show, the strong bond. But maybe that's something a parrot would do, So we recently had a really fun article for us that described love languages, right? And so love languages, for me, food is a big love language, or touch. So for parrots, a lot of that color. Also, again, whatever you can do to build that bond with their mate. So offering food could be another aspect to that.
Wow, that's really interesting. And what's something unexpected that you've learned about parrots while working with them?
Yeah, I was really thinking about this one because there's so many cool things about parrots, and I was going back to like 16-year-old Marco at the safari park, my first experience with parrots, and what really struck me, right? And honestly, the number one thing was that communication was a lot more than the auditory or than the vocal. When people think of parrots, they instantly think about mimicking and squawking and being loud, vivacious animals. A lot of them are, not to discredit that, but there's so much more to their communication than just a vocal. And now, being around these animals as long as I have, there's body posture, where the neck is being positioned, if they're showing me the side of their face versus straight on, if their eye eyes are pinning, can show excitement as an example, or even the blushing of their skin. How quickly they tuck back and preen a feather could be a sign, like if you own a cat, a tail twitch, could be a little warning of aggression. So there's so much. I say next time you look at a parrot, stop for a moment and just look at what it's doing and how it's communicating, because they, again, are just so intelligent, and they're saying so much more than just with their sounds, so that's definitely what I would say.
That's great to think about. And there's often that happens with a lot of animals. You think about the auditory communication right away, but then you notice these body language indicators, even with your own pets, like you said, with your cat, your dog. What you should really tune into what they're doing with their body, and that's going to help you show you what they're thinking.
Yeah, exactly. I'm even going back to the story of my African gray at home talking to those crows. I was fascinated by it. I'm sure it's happened in the past. I just never seen it before. And seeing how my African gray changed his call and how the crow responded back. And I saw interspecies communication, which happens all the time in the natural world, happens every day. I just don't think human beings realize how much it's done between different species. And I think it gets a little more like, to romanticize it a little bit, I think it's a good reminder for human beings that regardless of where you come from, there is that connectivity and a way to communicate with all sorts of walks of life,
Yeah, definitely. I love that viewpoint. I think that's great. And why are parrots important to the ecosystems that they live in?
Yeah, I'd preface it with every animal is important to their ecosystem. There's so much. What I love about this job that I have is I'm still a student for life, that we don't know everything. In fact, I would always distrust someone that tells me I know everything about this certain topic, because then you're not allowing yourself to grow, right? And so for me, parrots, the biggest, I think, and there's so many, but the one connection I see with their ecosystems is being seed dispersers. And that's a big deal with a lot of these animals that live in thick wooded or tropical areas where they're messy eaters, right? And so if you ever had a parrot, you know what I mean. And they're messy for a reason. I mean, they're climbing up the canopies of the trees for the most part. As an example, let's say the Amazon. They're climbing up, they're eating these fruits here. They fly off for kilometers and miles on end. They defecate, and it's rich nitrate poop. And poop is very important, right, in the zoo world too, for a lot of reasons. But in nature, these animals are helping plants grow. And parrots aren't the only. We've found out wildebeest, cassowaries, snakes, rattlesnakes here in San Diego, abilities to help disperse seeds. So it's amazing to me how much wildlife is connected. I would say animal wildlife is connected to plant wildlife, and they're all interconnected. And there's so much more other species that benefit, not to get too wild on you, but predators that depend on parrots as well. It could be a toucan raiding for parrot eggs, or a margay, a smaller wild cat species in the Americas. There's so many aspects. Every animal and plant are important. And there's a saying that I think is appropriate for right now. What I say is that every ecosystem is a diversity of plants, of animals, and that includes human beings. And it just speaks to the importance of diversity in species and all walks of life. And again, parrots in particular, for that attribute, for helping those forests stay vibrant and healthy, I think it's a very important role they play.
Yeah, that's great. And I think there's a lot of things that even we don't know about plants that might rely on parrots specifically just to disperse their seeds. And if they were gone, then the plants would die out too, because they don't have anybody to disperse those seeds.
Exactly.
So even things that we can't necessarily see are reasons why parrots are so important, and any animal is important to their ecosystem.
No, 100%.
And what are some of the problems that parrots are facing today?
Yeah, there's a lot happening, unfortunately, in the world, So overall, think about there's a little over 300 species of parrots found on planet Earth, and a little over 100 or so are either threatened, vulnerable, or endangered. And that's by that IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Your listeners can look up the IUCN Red List to get a more accurate idea of numbers of species overall. Yeah, parrots aren't doing so good for a lot of different reasons. The top two, I would say, actually, wildlife trafficking is probably one of the biggest aspects for parrots, unfortunately. And I want to reiterate what I said earlier. Parrots, you see them on television, you see them in a cartoon, maybe you read a story about pirates and you saw a parrot on the shoulder and, oh, I want one, Mommy, I want a parrot. parrots so bad. But what's sad about it is it comes from a good place, right? We're passionate, we love them, they look great, and we want to have that beauty in our home. So I totally get that. I feel the love. But people forget what I said earlier. It's like having a 2-year-old that can live 50, 60, 70 years. And I'm going to say it one more time and slower for the parents that are listening. It's like having a 2-year-old, right, for 60 years. Think about this for a second. Parrots in the United States go at an average between 8 families in their lifetime. And that is so sad when you think about it. I'm going to use a mammal because humans tend to connect with mammals a little better. It's like passing around a dog 8 different times to different families, and that's really traumatic to a parrot and to a dog as well. Parrots can exhibit psychological issues because of that, ripping their feathers out or other self-mutilating behaviors too, as an example. Not to get too extreme, but to really hone in or hammer in the point that we are affecting these individuals with the pet trade. I can speak to this because I identify as Latinx, and so my family's from Mexico. And there's a big tradition about having birds in your home growing up. And it was true for me growing up in a Mexican household. But again, our traditions shouldn't affect nature in a negative way. So it's something I try to bring up for the Latino community in particular. There's ways we can express our love for wildlife without affecting the population. So there's plenty of parrots in domesticated scenarios now and breeding programs that you can reach out if you really feel, if you've done your research and you really feel that a parrot is the right animal for you. Please reach out to a reputable breeder and ask the questions. Where did you get the parrot? Where is the breeder from? If they don't have any of that information, walk away. Do not support those scenarios. I'm sure your listeners have seen the visuals, or I would recommend, if you feel you have the stomach for it, of some of the very sad ways that parrots are being smuggled across borders, from little baby cockatoos smashed into water bottles as an example, or hubcaps and tires. It is severe and it's pretty sad, but we affect those scenarios. I tell people that it doesn't matter to me if you're the emperor of the world or a kid from the barrio, that everyone has a part to play in conservation. So a little thing like deciding where your dollars go, you're going to tell those people what's important to you. So even with wildlife trafficking, I'm not only talking about purchasing a parrot, I'm also talking about when you travel. Maybe you travel somewhere and they're offering pictures with a native animal. I know it sounds really great. You want that selfie for your social media handles. You don't know where the animal came from. You don't know if it got taken from its parents and now, on the corner of a street somewhere, getting pictures all of its life. So we need to think about these things when we travel. Even the feather of an animal. I'm always, even the wood when I travel, if I'm buying a necklace, where did this wood come from? Where did this seed come from? Because oftentimes plants, wood material, all this is wildlife trafficking items, and this can affect animals too. And we do it every day when we travel. I love traveling, but I'm always asking those questions of where my dollars are going. The other one, besides wildlife trafficking, which really is the big one affecting parrots, but of course deforestation is a big aspect, the lack of habitat. So these are some of the obstacles, amongst others, that are affecting overall parrot populations. But I know I brought the mood down a little bit, but a reminder that you can do really, really good things to support parrots in general and Mother Nature, of course.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about how we can help maybe the average person feeling like you're so disconnected from parrots who live in an exotic place? How can somebody who lives in maybe the United States help parrots?
Yeah, there's so many aspects to do it. It's really like, how much do you want to invest as an individual, right? You can always volunteer to a nonprofit is what I always suggest. And really, if you really want to get knee deep into conservation, that's a great way to do it. There's many conservation centers around the world in your own backyard. For instance, we have a parrot sanctuary here outside of my company that offers homes for domesticated parrots that need a home. Volunteers from San Diego go and they help out, take care of the parrots, feed them and whatnot. So you can volunteer to an organization or a nonprofit. Not only that, but also contributing and supporting your local zoos and aquariums. Accredited zoos and aquariums are really important. And it sounds like an easy thing, but it speaks so much because, we do so much. And just to speak to my organization alone, I mentioned we're the 2 zoos Safari Park and the San Diego Zoo. We do work with a local parrot that we did have 2 local parrots in North America, by the way. The Carolina parakeet is now unfortunately extinct, which is super sad. We have a thick-billed parrot. This is the local parrot found in the alpines of Mexico in North America, whose numbers are dropping regrettably. I think it's less than 2,000 adults, I think, at this point. But the point is that we have a breeding program here that we're working with to help establish a population under human care, and also sharing our information, whether it be nesting material or behavioral traits that we can share with our partners. And we have partners in Mexico that we're working with at the moment to help locate nesting sites where the wild thick-billed parrots in Sierra Madres in Mexico, and that way we can hopefully in the future protect those areas. So the more we know about them, the more we can benefit them. And when guests come to our park, whether it be the Safari Park or the San Diego Zoo, being the nonprofit that we are, an easy thing like just coming in, buying a ticket, or maybe buying a little parrot plushie, or eating a snack, you're helping out on these conservation efforts. And also, even what we're doing now, even if your listeners can re-listen to this episode, share it, pass it around, share your knowledge of conservation. There's so many things that everyone can do on a day-to-day. Even a little thing like shopping. This will be my 3rd one, because I can keep going forever. But another thing that people can do when they're going grocery shopping, think about what you buy. Again, we are the consumer. We tell those big companies what we want, not the other way around. I know it feels the other way around, but in reality, it's us who really make the decisions. And to remind people, a little thing like, say, what I do, I'm a big thing about reducing my plastic waste, but the other big one that will affect parrots as well is palm oil. So it's an ingredient that many of us use, whether it be in cookies or in baking items. Go into your kitchen right now if you're listening to this episode and just look how many things you have with palm oil: cookies, ice cream, et cetera, et cetera. It's a monoculture, so it's a strategy of maybe eliminating a whole forest, say in Sumatra or in the Amazon, and growing one crop of palm that produces this nut that we use as human beings for different items. It's devastating populations all over the world. And there's an easy thing you can do. The Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, props to them, because they created a very cool app, Cheyenne Mountain Zoo palm oil app. And all you got to do is download it. So when you maybe shopping online, just scan the item, and it'll tell you if it's sustainable palm oil. And that's a super easy thing to do. At home, my husband, sometimes he rolls his eyes when I ask him when he bought something new if it has palm oil. But hey, these are the things that we have to do, right? Every single day. We have the power. I want everyone to know, especially all the little kids out there, that you have the power too to help change the world also.
That's so great. And that sounds like an awesome app. I'm definitely going to have to download that.
Yeah, and it's a great app. I love it.
Yeah, definitely. And it shows you don't have to actually spend money to make a difference. You can actually save money making a difference by just not buying something that has palm oil that is not harvested in a sustainable way.
Exactly. Exactly right, Ryan.
Great. Yeah. Well, Marco, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I learned so much about parrots and how we can help them just listening to that. So
no, thank you, friend. No, thanks for the opportunity. It's always great talking birds, in particular parrots. And yeah, don't forget, for all your listeners out there, go out in nature, right? Podcasts are great. I love podcasts. Thank you for this opportunity. But just a reminder for everyone, go get connected with Mother Nature, right? We're a part of this big, beautiful blue planet with so many colors. So just remind yourselves that and support your local zoos and aquariums.
Definitely. Let's leave it on that note then.
Awesome.
I love what Marco said about going into nature. It's something we can forget to do with our busy lives, but getting out there can really make you feel connected to the world around you. I know that I always feel rejuvenated after spending some time in nature. After all, we're animals too. Marco was such an awesome guest, and I'm so glad he was able to come onto the show and give us his knowledge of parrots, as well as raise awareness to some of the issues that they're facing. We should all go support the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, as well as the Parrot Outreach Society and World Parrot Trust, who are all working to help captive and wild parrots. Thank you so much for coming on this adventure with me as we explored the world of parrots. You can find the sources that we use for this podcast and links to organizations that we reference at onwildlife.org. You can also email us with any questions at onwildlife.podcast@gmail.com. And you could follow us on Instagram at @on_wildlife or on TikTok at @onwildlife. And don't forget to tune in next month for another awesome episode. And that's On Wildlife.
listening to On Wildlife with Alex Ray. On Wildlife provides general educational information on various topics as a public service, which should not be construed as professional, financial, real estate, tax, or legal advice. These are our personal opinions only. Please refer to our full disclaimer policy on our website for full details.